I think here we are, 1 minute, 20 seconds to setting up, and we should be ready.
The anticipation's killing.
Oh my God. All right. Okay, fantastic. I don't believe it, but I was able to reach live with ubitennis.com, ubitennis.net, and ubitennis.es, 3 different languages, Italian, English, and Spanish. Here we are with Steve Flink and Chris Evert. I should have introduced Chris Evert first, because when we talk about living legend, I normally talk about Steve, who is an Hall of Famer, but this time we have a lady with us, a much more attractive lady than the face of Steve Flink that you can see lower here. And Chris, as a living legend, you look very young and very pretty. And I shouldn't even present you because everyone knows that you won 18 slams in singles, 7 Roland Garros, and then what else? 5 or 6 US Open, 6 US Open, 3 Wimbledon, 2 Australian Open. For sure, Steve Flink will come and get in every time I make a mistake in results, because yeah, he knows everything about you on the tennis court. I don't know off the tennis court. No. Okay. Well, good.
Thank God.
So, Chris, thanks God. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I mean, maybe I should ask Steve to start first, because he knows so many things about you. I can also mention the fact that you were 260 weeks #1, and probably that you get bored after all these years to hear everyone repeating all these scores, all these results. I mean, you had it for so many years that you would like to hear something different, probably.
I love hearing all of my achievements. I live for them. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, it's another part of my life. And it's another part of my life. And then I moved on and I got married and I had kids, and then you have other businesses, and but when you're reminded, it still makes me feel good when I'm still reminded, for sure.
Because the other day I spoke with Adriano Panatta. He said he doesn't have any more his trophies. He doesn't even know where they have been. He said, I made so many different houses. I don't even remember where it is. And I don't really care too much. The only thing that he's regretting is the only time he had a chance to do really well in Wimbledon in 1979, when he lost to Pat Dupree, and he should have won, because he won the first set and was up 4-love in the second, and he lost that chance because afterwards he had to play Tanner, and maybe he could reach Borg that he beat twice in Roland Garros. So anyway, so just different attitudes. I mean, what do you remember as most unforgettable for you? The 125 wins on clay, the first slam, what? The last?
I think over 18 years there are a few. I can't pinpoint one, and I'm kind of glad that I have a few and not one. First US Open when I was 16, it was like a fairy tale experience, playing that tournament and beating all those top players and being on center court every single match, and then losing to Billie Jean King, going back to my high school when, I got off the plane and my whole school was at the airport greeting me. Then I had to go back to the school and I had to make a speech, and my life changed. I became a celebrity at 16 after that first US Open. My life completely changed. So that was different. That was when I was young. I think the last two French Opens meant a lot to me too, because again, it's so funny. It's the beginning of my career and at the end when everybody counted me out. Nobody thought I was going to win Grand Slams anymore. Martina was playing so well. Steffi and Monica were coming up. And I won the 85 French Open and then I duplicated it and won the 86 French Open. And to me, at 30 and 31 years old, that propelled me to play even another few years. So those were pretty much highlights in my career. And of course, the rivalry with Martina was a highlight because she pushed me to become a better and better tennis player.
Which is a little bit what Federer says about Nadal and vice versa. Each one, they push each other to do better, and Djokovic too, of course. I mean, it's more or less same kind. The only difference is that they are three, or they were even four with Andy Murray. While you were just two, that's why you played 80 times. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was always, there was always some drama when I played Martina, because we were so different in our personalities and our style of play and our attitudes. We brought our own set of fans to the plate, and that was great for tennis. That was great for tennis.
Sure. Did you ever get angry with Steve Flink because he was always supporting Martina Navratilova when she was playing versus you? I mean, he was a great fan of Martina, and he didn't like you at all.
Yeah, and Steve, I'll let you talk after this because I know you're dying to talk. It really pissed me off, to tell you the truth, because I knew deep down inside he wanted Martina to win, even though he kept telling me he wanted me to win. He really wanted her. He liked her game better. He aspired to be himself a serve and volleyer and a very aggressive tennis player.
Such an hypocrite.
What a
secretly,
what you just
so
gave
go
her
ahead.
a life. I've never, I mean, I one of these days I'm going to defend myself. No, you know what, Tracy, what I want to hear you talk about, Ubaldo's gotten to some interesting points there to have you talk about the highlights of your career in the beginning and the end, and US Open of 71 and the run to the semis, and those last two French were remarkable. But I want you to tie it into today a little bit. Something you've discussed a lot in other interviews lately, and I want us to chew on this topic a bit, about how in your day, it wasn't just the Grand Slam events that were your priority. The top players, there were other events, the end of the year championships, the Colgate Series out in California. And you pointed toward other targets as well.
Yeah.
And that, of course, it's changed so much, especially in the last 20 years. Talk about how, what it was like for you as a great player back then, and how you sort of set out to hit different targets. And it wasn't just the slams. And of course, some of those years, you didn't even, during team tennis years, you were playing two majors a year, Wimbledon and the Open, because most of the players wouldn't go to Australia at the end of the year with Christmas, and the French was barred for team tennis players. So take it from there.
Yeah. Well, you're right. But the reasoning—
I don't believe he's right.
He's right. And the reasoning for that was we were building a tour. I mean, there was no tour for women in the late 60s to play. There was a tour for the men, but no tour for the women. And Billie Jean was the one, along with Gladys Heldman and Virginia Slims, basically got the three of those powerhouses got together and formed the Virginia Slims tour. And for this tour to work, like all the top players had to be playing almost every week. There wasn't, well, you can go here and you can go here, and then you have 2 weeks off. And no. We had to support this event to get crowds, to sell tickets, to get sponsors. This is a new idea in women's sports. I don't think we were the first women's sport, professional women's sport. Nobody else had done this. So this was a big undertaking in a climate where women weren't necessarily accepted as sports people. You know, it was pretty masculine. It was pretty rough. It was sweat. It was, you know, women weren't supposed to, you know, women had their roles in society. So Billie Jean, you know, look, she just broke through that barrier and created a living for all of us. And in order to do that, we really had to support the Virginia Slims. We had to go to all the press conferences and do visits and make appearances and try to promote the sport of tennis. And the Grand Slams were kind of an afterthought during those few years. It's like, oh, I get a break. I have a break. I'm going to Paris, you know, play the French Open, right? I mean, it was like a break from, because we played 21 to 25 Virginia Slims tournaments a year. You know, we played a lot of tennis. So the Grand Slams were not at a, you know, on a pedestal at that time, for sure. And like you said, I played 6 Australian Opens out of 18 years. And I missed 3 French Opens when I was number 1. So that's why I think there's a lot more that goes along with being the greatest ever. It's not only about how many Grand Slams you've won.
Also because if you think that Ken Rosewall missed 44 slams and the Rod Laver missed also, you know, 5 years, 5 years of slams, 20 slams.
So how can you say that? Yeah, how can you, you know, and he won the Grand Slam.
Yeah.
In 1 year.
Sure.
Yeah. He had won the Grand Slam in '62, and then, you know, he turned
69.
pro at the end of that year, and then he couldn't play again at the Slam till '68. But the guy the one that really missed the most, the one who was cheated the most, was Pancho Gonzalez at Ubaldo, because he turned pro at the end of the '40s. So he was gone almost 20 years, came back and still was great in the first couple of years of open tennis, but God knows what he would have done in the 50s and early 60s. He would have been almost unstoppable.
When he played Passerelle, and it was the
69.
longest match.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. Can I just say one story, quick story about Pancho Gonzalez? My dad took me to a tournament in Hollywood, Florida that he was playing. And we were 3 blocks from the tournament, and I heard a boom, and this big loud voice and yelling, and I go, oh my God, who's that? And my dad said, oh, it's probably Pancho. So we got closer, and I was afraid to go on near the
How old
court.
were you? How old were you then?
Oh, so young, because he was playing in a tournament. So, I mean, I was 10-ish,
12? Okay.
10 to 12.
Yeah.
And I was afraid of him. I'm intimidated by him, afraid of him, and didn't even want to get near the court. But he was ranting and raving, and he had the biggest serve I've ever seen. He had the biggest forehand I've ever seen. He was a, you know, specimen of a man, and he had a booming voice, and wow, what a presence, what charisma. He would have been unbelievable, you know, in this day and age. So that's my Pancho Gonzalez story.
Great stories. And so I hope he won when you saw him play that day.
I think he did win.
Yeah.
And when I met him, he couldn't have been more gentle and sweet. So, I mean, there's definitely 2 sides to him.
Listen, since you have been talking also about other tournaments and not just the slams, and we didn't have any agreement about this, what Steve just said a few minutes ago, I'd like to catch our off guards, Steve, asking him how many times Chris Evert has won the Italian Open.
I don't even keep that in my permanent memory. That's not in the collection. I would say.
Yeah, you see those? You see those fingers? They are 5.
Yeah,
and
well,
she won twice in Rome, and 3 times in Perugia. And today I had to speak. I spoke a few minutes ago with a girl who has lost to her. She told me about 20 times. She's called Virginia Ruzzici. She said she beat me all the time, and I was talking to her. And I want to show you, because normally I show books that Steve Flink has written, and he's written about you, about your matches with versus Navratilova and all that. But this time I want to show one of mine, which is, I don't know if you can see it, but
Roma.
it's Roma Italian Open, 40 years of finals.
Right.
And I have for each final the story of the final,
Okay.
the draw, and the pictures of Chris.
And Rosic.
This was the 1980. Then let's see. This is the well, you cannot see well, but I mean this is the 81, I guess. Yes. And then with all the stories written by the newspapers in Italy, I mean, of course, you cannot read Italian, but it's the pictures with Chris, who was sponsored by LS. LS was an Italian company, you see. And
yeah, I wore their clothes.
And I will show you one day, when I see you, I can send you or give you this book. There is a possibility to read it, I mean, to see it with the pictures.
Okay.
And the stories on the through some links. So that I wanted just to show you, because
no, Steve, that is the first time I knew something about my record that you didn't know. Ever.
That it may be, but you put up 5. I said 5 or 6.
Oh, you did? I didn't hear you.
I said that, yes.
Oh, well, you're. No, I take that back.
Well, but still 5 or 6 is still. Wait, Steve. Still 5 or 6 is inaccurate, and we will keep you in this trio conference just because we want to be nice to you.
I appreciate that.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay, let's go on. What should we talk about? Let's say that if you talk about the slams that are not so important, or that they are important but not as maybe they should be, what do you think about the famous nightmare for Serena Williams, who is looking to finally beat or equalize the record of Margaret Court? And Margaret Court won 11 Australian Open when not many people were going sometimes. And she had 4 chances, 4 finals after her becoming a mother. And she lost them all without winning a set. What is your reaction to that? Do you think it's just mental?
Well, first of all, the 4 losses, those 4 women played out of their minds. I mean, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong. Osaka beat her at the US Open. She played a tremendous match.
Yeah.
Halep beating her at Wimbledon. Halep could have beaten a man she could do no wrong. Halep.
Right. Who was the other one at Wimbledon? You're doing great. Who beat her the year before Halep at Wimbledon?
Okay, calm down. Calm down. Kerber.
Yes,
wow,
yes.
Kerber beat her. I wasn't going in order. Kerber played the match of her career.
Yeah.
And then Andreescu.
Right.
Okay, so all 4 of those women I just feel like they went out there and, had nothing to lose. And did Serena feel the pressure? Of course she felt the pressure. And then the pressure, she didn't play her best because of the pressure, but we've still seen her win when she's not playing her best, right, Steve? We've still seen her win at 80% in the past when she's not playing her best. But these girls were playing so well that they took the match from her. Look, I would never count Serena out. And when people say, do you really think she's going to win it? I go, yeah, why not? Why not? Why not? Especially if the US Open happens, why not? Everybody's starting out on an even field in as far as nobody's played for 8 or 9 months by that time. I saw an Instagram of Serena working out and she looks lean and trim and, she looks in great shape. And I think if she spent 8 or 9 months with her daughter and her husband, she's going to be raring to go, you know, for the US Open. So, I think it's very possible, as long as she keeps the inspiration up, and as long as she keeps the, again, keeps wanting it. It's all about how badly she wants it. I think you got to give her definitely a great shot to win one more.
Do you think 1 year of stop will have helped her fitness? I mean, let's say preparing better, losing maybe some weight, and then in 2021 she could be more competitive than she was possibly going to be in 2020, or not?
The thing is with anyone who has a family and has kids, when they go home and they have 8 months with their family because they have to be at home, they're either going to emerge saying, I don't want to leave home. I have a good life. I don't want to leave this little one. Or they're going to emerge saying, jumping up and down and saying, okay, that was a great period, but I still have things to achieve in my tennis. I still have goals. And I think Serena might be the latter, because she takes her daughter with her everywhere. So, I mean, she's the kind of person that I think has been able to compartmentalize very, very well, having a child and then going out there and forgetting about it and just being really competitive. She's been able to balance that pretty well. So I think, and like you said, I think she's had time to get herself in better shape. And I think that's always been a problem with her, because she gets injured and then she can't train as well as she would like to.
Well, there's a couple of interesting factors, Chrissy. You no doubt that if she can go deep into the tournament, we saw that with the back-to-back Wimbledon US Open finals there the previous 2 years, all the 4 matches you cited. But then again, she's still vulnerable against more players than she might have been at one time. She's still 38. And then the other question I have is, what will it be like for her at the Open with no crowd connection? She's so emotive on a court. She does a lot of fist pumping and she gets, the adrenaline is flowing. And for her, maybe it's more important than it is for some of the other players. How do you think she will adjust to that aspect of it?
I think that she will bring her own energy on the court. And I think she has a lot of passion, a lot of energy. There's always drama. And I've seen her play matches. Actually, I've seen her play matches when she's pretty much ignored the crowd. I mean, I don't think she has to have a crowd. I think she's her own crowd. And I think she will be able to do fine. Like I said, she can compartmentalize and maybe focus a little bit better. I had one other thought about but there's some players that thrive on that crowd atmosphere. It's going to affect players differently, I think.
Who do you think thrives the most? Who thrives on it? Who are you thinking of?
The more volatile players, like Kyrgios and Jimmy Connors, John McEnroe. I'm going back. I'm thinking.
No, I know, but don't you think even someone like Federer? Now, Federer was one of the first things he said early on when he heard about no crowds before anything was, can't we at least have a third of the crowd or half the crowd? That was an interesting comment from him, didn't you think?
Yes. Yes. Because the crowds adore him and they really all get behind him.
While they don't like so much Djokovic, if you remember last Wimbledon, what happened was almost, I would say, unfair, because there were 99% of people cheering for Federer and nobody for Djokovic, apart from his wife.
Yeah, no, I think Djokovic would be fine in this environment. And I think Nadal has his own inner energy button that he doesn't need anybody else. He could go out and play and practice with nobody and be as intense and be as into it. So I think he'll be fine.
Well,
But,
in that sense, Chris, the inner energy, Serena and Nadal are probably similar. Don't you think so? I mean, in the inner energy that they can give to themselves.
I think it's the passion. I think even more than energy, it's just they give even more. They give more emotion, whether internally or externally. They feel, I think, more than the other players, and it's inside them. I mean, they don't. It's almost like they don't need recognition, and they don't need to be told repeatedly or shown repeatedly how great they are. And I think that they know it deep inside. So that propels them to play well.
Listen, I'd like to ask you if the two biggest upset that you remember in your years following playing and following tennis are the same that I feel. One is Chang beating Lendl at Roland Garros, and another one is Roberta Vinci beating Serena Williams at the US Open in 2015. Are those for you the same, or are you thinking about something else?
You say the first one. Who is the first one?
First one was Michael Chang beating Ivan Lendl in the last 16 at Roland Garros, with Lendl getting crazy, Chang serving from the underarm.
Yeah, no, I remember the match.
Yeah, that you were not there. That was your last year in '89. So you weren't at the French that year.
No,
you followed
I
it
saw it.
You saw it. I remember talking to you about it when it was over. Yeah. Would you put those two, as Ubaldo said, would you lump those together? Roberta Vinci beating Serena and denying her the Grand Slam, and Chang upending Lendl?
Well, what preface it by saying the two biggest upsets, did you say?
Yeah, the surprises. I mean, something you could never predict. Some matches that there have been so many, of course. But I mean, Serena to lose to Roberta Vinci.
Well,
and
that's
I know
for sure. For sure. That's one. Yeah.
Concentrate. Focus on that one. Talk about, because you were there, and we all are anticipating that Serena had beaten Venus in the quarters. It looked like she was primed for the title. It was set up. Simona Halep, she's losing, of course, to the other Italian woman, Panetta. So Serena is up. She's got a chance there at 2-love in the third and going for 3-love to be finishing off this match, and knowing Flavia Panetta is her opponent in the final. What could have been more certain than that? So what do you think went wrong against Vinci?
Steve, after so many years, Pennetta, not Penera, Pennetta. You know, penne, like the pasta, penne, pennette.
Pinetta. All right, I'll work on that.
Okay, Pennetta. When Serena walked on the court with Vinci, and after the first few games, well, first of all, before the match, I thought Serena was going to wipe her off the court.
Of course. I
thought, this girl can't hurt Serena Williams. And I was only thinking about power. Like, she didn't have that one power shot to hurt her. And I think most people were thinking that. Then when they get on the court, Vinci played such a smart match and crafty, and she was just giving her junk. She was giving her slices. She was giving her lobs. She was sneaking into the net. She was giving her shots. She had her rhythm. And I just think it threw her off. It just totally threw Serena off. And she got ruffled. She got really ruffled, and she got really kind of nervous and irritated. And then it wasn't great tennis from Serena, and it was very smart tennis from Vinci.
And some frozen feet from Serena, alluding to the tension that you just mentioned. But I just want to tell you quickly a personal story, because Ubaldo will appreciate this. After that first match with Halep and Pinetta, or however we say it correctly, Ubaldo leads the Italian press right out onto Arthur Ashe Stadium court, hugs and kisses, and and they're Italian girls in the final, and they've got it made. Then Roberta beats Serena, and now they go and the whole scene is repeated with the hugs and they have never had a moment like that in the history of Italian tennis, to have these two facing off the finals of the when neither one was expected to win.
I think even more so than Chang and Lendl upset, I think the upset was that those two Italians reached the final of the US Open. I mean, who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Nobody.
You know? And it was, but it really was a great story. It really was a great story.
I'm not used to bet, but if I had bet a final Vinci Pennetta at the beginning of the tournaments, I would be a billionaire.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, that must make your country feel good.
Before we get off this, I just want you to tell the viewers a little bit about, you made the transition to television. So now, at first, when you first did TV after you retired in 1989, it wasn't as easy because you still knew the players so well and people you had competed against. So it wasn't an easy transition, and you adjusted and did a great job. And then you went off and you started your family. You had a period of about 9 years away from the TV. But in the recent years, now you have an age gap with a lot of the players, and you've established a relationship as more of a journalist. And yet, you're still a player. You're still known to them as a player. So it strikes me that you've been able to find a nice balance, that you know Serena well, you know Halep well. Talk about how you managed to develop relationships with them, or at least have some good rapport, and yet still be able to do your job in the booth as you have, and call it candidly and honestly and as you see it.
That's a loaded question.
He's playing always the violin when he's talking to you. I mean, he's so much in love that, you know, it's
that's an interesting question. I will address the fact that when I first retired, of course, my agents were like, you got to go into TV, you got to go into TV, you got to write a book, you got to do this, you got to do that. So I went into TV, and I was terrible. And I was the first to admit it. And I never felt comfortable. These girls were my friends. I didn't want to be critical. And basically I played my game from instinct. I didn't have to think a lot. So I had to like analyze the match, what was going on. And my analyzing was, you know, that's a nice shot down the line. That's about as in depth as I could go, you know, or boy, she looks upset down there. And so then I left TV and had a family. And then I think what really helped me when I came back was the fact that I've had my brother John and I owned a tennis academy. And in this academy, we've trained Masson Keys, and we've trained Isla Tomljanovic and Lauren Davis. We've trained a lot of girls who have turned professional or who have gone to college. And so I learned technique. I learned a new technique. It's the Western forehand, Chris. Guess what? It's not Eastern, it's Western. It's an open stance now. Guess what? It's not turning sideways. It's loading up on your back leg. So I learned from the coaches very much how this generation was playing. And therefore I was able to be, when I went on in the studio or when I went in the booth, I was able to articulate exactly what was going on as far as their game. And then you have to be a journalist, and you have to do research on them as people, on their coaches, on their family. So it became kind of fun, you know, in a sense. And working for ESPN, I mean, you got Pam Shriver, you've got Mary Jo, you've got, you know, Patrick McEnroe, Darren, Brad, you've got some really good journalists and commentators there that I fed off of too. And I learned a lot from them.
If I may tell you something that you don't know for sure, is that my son went to the John Evert Academy, was invited by your brother, and spent there only I think 1 or 2 weeks, but he was he was very happy to be there. And
What
Okay.
year,
and he
Ubaldo?
told
No,
me,
no, 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 no. I'm going to record this. I want you to say exactly what you said, that he went to the John Evert Tennis Academy. I want to show John this because he's always complaining that's the Chris Evert. Okay. So anyway, all right, go ahead.
well, I can say that my son Giancarlo was nicely invited to practice tennis and learn tennis at the John Evert Tennis Academy. And he told me also, since he had been also at Bollettieri's for a while and also at the other one, Saddlebrook, and he
Yeah.
told me that John Evert was the nicest guy and the academy where the atmosphere was the best.
You got
All
that
right,
now?
I'll give you $100,000 for that. That was, thank
Well,
you.
no,
I remember a John Carlo, but was that John Carlo? Juan
Yes.
Carlo?
Giancarlo, yes, Juan Carlos
What,
is in
Ubaldo, what
Spanish.
year?
When?
What
When
year
was
did he
this?
go?
Well, I think must be 14 years ago or something like that, because my son is now almost 30 and he was there, I think, when he
Wow.
was 15 or 16. He was in Bradenton,
Wow.
sorry, in Saddlebrook when Maria Sharapova was there. And there is a
Okay.
picture of him.
Okay.
So that is the more or less. But it was John who
Nice.
that I met, I think at Roland Garros or so. He said, "Why don't you send me your son?" and so on. So it was very, very nice.
Oh, great.
And we also,
Thank you.
he wrote a story on his different experience in different academies, and he wrote what I just said. So it's I have
Thank you.
I have the paper where it is, so I can show
Email
it one
it.
day.
Email it. Yeah.
I do. I take a picture and send it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Listen, so anyway, what else? Let's say, do you think that the fact that you were just you and Martin at your time competing was less or more, let's say, was so different from the actual period when there are 4 players in the men's, or 3 now that Mari has been injured, and the women's situation now, where apart from Serena, all the others, they win one
Yeah.
slam, then they disappear maybe for 6 months, then the another one comes out. I mean, what is your feeling about it? What would be better for to promote tennis? That there is a big rivalry between 2 or 3 players, or
Right.
that there is always some unexpected winner?
Both. I think it's evident when Martina and I were playing. And I don't know if, I mean, 3 or 4 players might even dilute it, but when there's one-on-one, and it would a one-on-one rivalry, and there are so many contrasts in that rivalry and so much drama. Again, you bring your own set of fans that transcend tennis. These are fans that are not even in tennis, and they come to the plate, and you get a lot of atmosphere, and you build the numbers. You play 40 matches, 50 matches, 60 matches. The more matches you play, the bigger the rivalry gets. That's huge for tennis. On the other hand, what's also huge for tennis is when one player dominates, like Serena. Serena dominant. We got the highest ratings when Serena played probably the last 4 or 5 years in the finals. Sometimes, most of the time, bigger ratings than when the men played, because she's going for a record. And she is, arguably the greatest women player that ever lived. And she has such a big personality and charisma about her. And she's so good. She's so good. And so, I mean, I think both. I think when you have like a top 10 and everybody's beating everybody, that's when it gets kind of boring, to me anyway. Nobody stands out. Everybody's afraid to really stand up and grab it, and so to me, that's why we've needed Serena the last few years, because the top 10, they just keep, they lose to everybody, they beat everybody, but there's nobody that is consistently proven that they are a number one player. Do you agree with that, Steve?
Yeah, I do. But I'm hoping that maybe what will evolve is something like an Osaka and Andreescu rivalry. Maybe when they grow into their talent a little bit more, we'll get that. But I wanted to ask you, based on what Yubala was just saying, you remember when Tracy was starting to peak, and that would have been interesting, don't you think, had she not gotten injured and she'd still been around? You would have had a trio then, somewhat like Roger, Rafa, Novak today. You and Tracy almost very similar. And in some ways, Rafa and Novak are similar, battling out from the baseline. Roger's the one attacking more. Same thing then. Martina would have been dealing with you and Tracy, and you would have had both hitting your passing shots and having return. That could have been an interesting period, don't you think, had Tracy her body not broken down so young, that it might have been actually good for you and Martina.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at two great champions who never really had their time, the time that they would have been champions. And they are Tracy Austin and Monica Seles.
Right.
And Tracy Austin, again, winning the US Open at 16, winning the US Open again at 18, beating Martina and I. I mean, she beat me 5 times in a row before I finally beat her. And I think that it would have been an interesting mix with Martina and Tracy and I. And on the other hand, look at Monica Seles. I mean, she was out for 2.5 years. And at that time, that gave Steffi a little more freedom to win Grand Slams.
Yeah, it did. No doubt about it. That period between 93 and 95, you're so right. But while you're on the subject of Monica, I think you should talk a little bit about the fact that your career, in some ways, we all talk about the US Open of 71, but in some ways, the big launching pad that I think planted a seed in your mind of what you could be was beating Margaret Court as a 15-year-old in 1970 in Charlotte. That was a big, big win. It was when a lot of people first heard of you, just a small tournament. Yeah. And then how at the end of your career, your last big win was over Monica, which kind of showed the longevity of your career over nearly 20 years, that your first big win is over Margaret, and 19 years later, your last big win is over Monica, and now Monica was the 15-year-old and you were 34. Reflect on that a bit, because I think it says a lot about your enduring excellence, really. Well,
yeah, and also my pride. I mean, I felt like the year before I retired, I felt signs that I was not as motivated as I had been during my career. And I felt like I was getting burned out, and then I wanted to do other things. And I hung in there one more year, and then it was time to go, but I wasn't the kind of player that wanted to play and play and play, even though I was ranked 40, 60, 80, 100, but I still loved the game. I think what impressed me was that when I came on the tour, I was in the top 4 in the world. And when I left the tour, I was in the top 4 in the world. So, during those 18 years, I was top 4 in the world. And that's, I don't think many players can say that.
Let me imitate Steve Flink and make an announcement. Chris Evert, from 74 to 86, for 13 years in a row, she won at least 1 slam. Am I correct, Steve? That's correct. And that actually is that may be her most important record, because even though we did talk, Chrissy, about the changing times and the greater emphasis on the slams today, what makes that record so remarkable that Yubala just mentioned, the 13 years in a row of winning at least 1 major, is that some of those years, as we were saying earlier, you were only getting 2 cracks. You were playing Wimbledon and the Open. You didn't have 4 chances to do it every year. You played 56 majors over the 19-year stretch from 71 to 89. So you were averaging 3 a year, only because in the 80s, you did most of the time play all 4. So here you were
somehow pulling off one a year at least for 13 years in a row. Have you thought much about that accomplishment?
I know I was opening a door to Steve Flink's stats. So he immediately went through it. Okay, go ahead, Chris. Say what you.
Yeah. But you know, it's interesting because I really never thought of them while I was doing them. While I was playing, I never really thought of stats. I don't even think I mean, I remember the 13 in a row. I remember then somebody brought up the semifinal one, 52 out of 56, I think.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. That's correct.
You know,
Very
semifinals, which probably is even better than that. And then the 125 wins on clay in a row. And then my win, yeah, I don't know. All these, thank God they were brought to my attention later on in my career, because I really wouldn't have wanted to keep of them while I was playing, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was, look, I wasn't the premier physical athlete. I didn't, you know, I didn't have the power that a lot of these players have, or the movement, or not to demean myself, but I was a really good athlete, but I wasn't an exceptional athlete like a lot of the other players. And so I made up for it, you know, in consistency and focus and hunger.
I can tell you that there are some players who just leave on a match that they played against you, even if they've lost. In Italy, we have Laura Golarsa, who was 7 times 2 points far from the winning versus you in Wimbledon. I think was 1979 or 89.
No, 89, Ubaldo.
89. Yeah, 1989, sorry. And she still talks, and everyone asks her, oh, but you were almost close to beat Chris Evert. So just to give you an idea of how different perspectives there are in, you know, for different people. I mean, that was an incredible match for the Italian audience.
Very important also because it's the last match that Chrissy ever won at Wimbledon. She lost in the semis to Steffi. That was, she did not want to end her Wimbledon career, with all due respect, Ubaldo, to an Italian player named Golarsa. That was not acceptable. She was not going to. But don't you think that one of the that was on court one? I remember that match so well. And you're 5-2 down in the third and pulled it out. But
why were you watching?
I was watching
Why were you going to watch Chris Evert when there were more important matches somewhere else?
Because he heard I was losing.
I just heard she was losing. I just happened to show up. But I think the reason that you won that match, I think you went through you won the first set routinely, and then she won the second easily 6-2 and had you 5-2 down the third. So you really had a bad patch there. And yet I think the reason you won that match was very simple. Your father was there with your mother. And I remember you're saying afterwards, you did not want, you really wanted to win that one for him, as you often did. But this was different. You knew it was your last Wimbledon. You didn't want him going home on the heels of a loss to Laura Golarsa. You could accept Steffi, but not Golarsa. But wasn't your father, and take that to the next level in terms of the incentive and how he inspired you throughout your career?
No, I agree. He but that's one that you can tell, though, if I lose the second set and I'm down 5-2 in the third, or winning the first, and consistency and hunger in the match. And that was one of the reasons why that was my last year that I played. But now, of course,
Chrissy, repeat that line about losing the second set, because your voice, the voice breaking up.
Okay. That was, I won the first set easy, lost the second set, and was down 5-2 in the third. That was one of the reasons why I retired, was because I wasn't maintaining that focus and that consistency in my matches anymore, you know? So, but in answer to your question about, my dad started everybody in our family playing tennis. And my sister Jeannie, who passed away this year, was also on the tour, on the WTA tour. And my 3 other siblings played #1 for their college. So my dad never had to pay a cent for college tuition, and they got scholarships. And so, I mean, we did well by tennis, but he was my inspiration, definitely, for so many years, and my coach. And You know, I won a lot of tennis matches for him. You know,
I
one of
think
the good guys.
Ubaldo, he was one of the nicest guys you could ever meet.
I met him. I met him. I met him once or twice. I even shook hands and talked a little bit. But of course, but I remember also that instead Chris in Perugia was with his mother.
I was with my mom. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Her mother traveled with her much more. Her mother, especially when she was younger, and that was not uncommon. But her father would get so nervous watching you play that it was easy for him to pace around the pro shop and Holiday Park and wait for the phone call to come in, Ubaldo, because often in those days he couldn't necessarily see it on television. He had to wait until Chrissy called him to let him know whether she won or lost.
Yeah. I used to walk from center court right to the office at Wimbledon and say, could I use your phone, please? And I used to call him, you know, because a lot of times TV in the early years, I don't know, it was taped or something and it wasn't live. So he had no idea. But yeah, don't you think the most memorable call though that you ever made to him, thinking back? There's the 1980 US Open when that 5-match losing streak against Tracy came to an end. That match, you know, he couldn't watch that on television. It was not on live TV. You went into that little office in between the grandstand and the stadium. And I happened to be there, Ubaldo, with her mother and a few others. And she broke into tears as she told her father that she'd won and handed the phone to her mother and then said to her mother, tell Dad he's got to come up for the final. And he did. And then he saw her win it over Mandlikova. Give us your recollections of that.
I have said already everything, Steve.
No, but I want to hear it from her, her emotions.
Yeah, I got to a point where I lost to Tracy Austin 5 times in a row. She was sort of the younger, better version of me. And the reason why I won the match was I was in the player room the day before and Don Candy came up to me. I always give Don Candy, God bless his soul, he just passed away. He came up to me, he was Pam Shriver's coach, and he said, so how do you feel about tomorrow? And I said, I feel great. And he goes, well, how are you going to play? And I go, I'm just going to play my game. And he said, well, then you're going to lose. And I said, what? And he goes, well, if you play your game, you're going to lose like you did the last 5 times. And I said, oh. And he goes, think about it. This is what you should do. And he showed me how I had played her. She was the aggressor. I was on the defense. And he said to me, you have to play outside your box. You have to come to the net. You have to put away second serves. You have to use your drop shot, draw her into the net. You have to create shots that you normally don't play because you have to ruffle her feathers a little bit and get her off guard. And I said, oh, okay. Well, anyway, I went out there the next day and I played that way the first set and I lost 6-4. But I was making a few too many errors because I wasn't really comfortable going for so many winners, but I was going for winners. And I lost 6-4 and I go, I was pretty close, 1 game away or whatever. And I kept at it, got more comfortable, 6-1, 6-1.
Now, Ubaldo, what she's not telling you, Ubaldo, is was the first, that match was on 11 a.m. match. Remember how early they used to start, Ubaldo, with these semifinals? So she's on at 11 a.m. It's drizzling. They almost had to stop the match. And you also were down 4-love. And if I may say so,
in the first set, yeah.
Ubaldo is giving me a hard time for being too complimentary. There was a pretty miserable first 4 games of the match. But you did a great job to then come back and make that set so competitive. And as is the case in so many matches like that, if Tracy would have maybe won that set 6-1 or 6-2, she might have been unstoppable. But you gave her a real scare by making that first set so close. And it carried right into the second and third.
And I think, Steve, if I'm not wrong, didn't I beat Tracy Love and Love in a tournament?
At the very end, yeah. A couple of years later, you did.
Okay, I did.
In the Meadowlands.
In the Meadowlands. So I felt at that point, I realized that I was more flexible. I could adapt better than she could. I had more shots than she did. And I saw that there are limitations to her game. What she did was really, really, really good. But then outside the box, she played inside the box. And then when I played outside my box, I would beat her.
I wish I had the same prestige and than Don Candy when I talk to Camilla Giorgi, because Camilla Giorgi always says, I play my game. And I tell her, look, sometimes you should also consider who is in front of you, and maybe
Yes.
you should adjust your game. And she said, no, I play my game. And so there is no way I can persuade her that she could try to change something, because she has beaten 9 top 10 players. And so she has the potential to do well, but she doesn't know how to change her game at all. And that makes me angry, because really I see her on air some potential. I mean, she beat Wozniacki, she beat so many players at the US Open and important tournaments, but then she may lose to anybody the next round anyway.
And then
Serena on the ropes. Sorry.
What she does is she refuses to go on Ubaldo's motorbike. He's very famous for taking these players on his motorbike and driving them around Wimbledon. I refuse to do it. I do reports with him standing there sitting on it, but I will not go on a ride through Wimbledon. He's very daring.
That would be quite a sight, Steve, with you.
I took Mary Carrillo. Mary Carrillo, we drove around, and also Camilla Giorgi and other players. I mean, the Italians, I mean, some others. But one day I will off to Chris, because it's fun. I must say that it's beautiful, especially in Paris, because in Paris to go along the river, under the Tour Eiffel, and do the Champs-Élysées on a scooter is something that, repays me off for the work I've been doing during the day. At night, you go to eat in a restaurant, you park in front of the restaurant. Right. It's fantastic. And
you can bring your dogs, you can bring your animals. And I do miss Paris. I really, during this time of the year, it is some, the other thing with Camilla, I always feel like if you play, okay, first of all, you've got to think about your own game and you've got to put your best game forward. But if you think about and expose your opponent's weaknesses, to me, that's 2 games a set.
Yeah, it's like playing chess. You must know a little bit which are the weaknesses of your opponents.
Well, you should ask her, like Don Candy asked me, like after losing to her 5 times, he goes, well, how did that go? How did that go? You should just say, well, how's it going playing your own game? I mean, do you want to do something different, take a chance and maybe beat some good players and get higher on the rankings? Then maybe you should think about doing things a little different, having a little different strategy.
I know. Well, but there is her father is the coach.
Yes.
So I cannot intrude too much myself and say, look, why don't you follow me instead? I mean,
that's true.
It's not my role. It's not my role. But if I were Don Candy, probably I could do it. Anyway, tell me something about. I don't know if you heard of the new rules that the ATP is enforcing now for the rankings. They are going to in a way to accept that all the players keep their points won last year. Let's say, for instance, if Nadal doesn't play decides not to play the US Open, he keeps the 2,000 points that he won last year. And same thing for all the others, of course. So which means that it will be more difficult for the players who are behind in the rankings to jump over, because those who have already won the points, they are not going to lose them. And some players like Berrettini, for instance, who made the semifinal last year, may not go to the US Open because it's better for him to keep those points. Yeah. And while even Medvedev has had such a fantastic summer season last year, that if he stays home in France, he will keep all those points and he can just play Roland Garros and the clay course where he had no points almost. So what do you think about all this? And why? One last question. Since you were,
This is the first, by the way, this is the first time I've heard of the rank. I haven't really gone into the rankings. I've been on, you know, I've listened to some of the WTA meetings, and, you know, I know they want to make the rankings as fair as possible and to sort of, you know, cut down on, well, they don't want to have to penalize players who aren't playing these tournaments.
Of course.
So, but I don't, you know, I don't really know enough about to give you an opinion that I would have to look into it a little bit more.
All right.
Steve, I mean, I just heard about this probably a couple of days ago, and I've been so much about the US Open and talking to Stacy and trying to get that organized with the USTA and the USTA Foundation, the WTA. I really, to make an informed comment on that, I would have to look into that a little bit more. Sorry.
I understand. Let's say that ATP at least is taking some decisions. WTA is always a little slower. I mean, to you know, they follow up, but they for some reason they are not so I don't know, active, in my opinion, or quick.
Well, they're doing better in the COVID-19 situation, though, with their tournaments.
Yeah. Well,
the men are being a little bit reckless, aren't they? And the men are the ones with the women are I think being a little more disciplined in their decision making as far as being safe. So I'm just trying to say, it's the men may be better, maybe more forward in the rankings, but the women are taking this COVID, I think, a little more seriously.
Yeah, well, they didn't go to in a discotheque in topless, for instance.
Say that again.
They didn't go in a discotheque in topless, like, I mean, like Novak Djokovic did, but I mean.
But Chrissy, give us your thoughts a little bit about, we talked about the Open, I mean, and no fans, and it's going to be, then 2 weeks later, some of these players might have to just pick and choose and play one or the other. Some will play both, but those that play both would have to leave New York. Let's say Djokovic and Nadal went there, played the final, then they'd have to shift surfaces 2 weeks later in Paris and now play in front of crowds, 50. What do you think about how the French is approaching it versus the US? They're saying 50 to 60% crowd capacity. So they want fans and they want to limit it, but you think that's a little dangerous to have that many fans?
You know what? It depends on what's going on over there. I don't know. I think Europe is, it's not as bad. It seems like we've had our second wave over here in the States, and we have to be a little bit more careful. That's why I think, you know, I wonder, you know that Federer's not coming over because of his knee, but I wonder if Nadal is going to take that chance of coming over here, playing on hard courts, maybe getting injured, maybe not even winning it, when he could just stay in Europe and practice on the clay.
And Djokovic might think the same way too. I get the feeling they're both tempted to do that and not risk coming to New York and quarantine and all the rest.
Yeah, but how about this idea? If Djokovic sees Nadal and Federer and maybe a couple of other players not playing, and he's chasing the numbers, wouldn't he want to take advantage of that and come over and win it?
Yeah, he might. I just think they know it's going to be a big sacrifice to come to New York in certain respects, and they can't have their full team and all of that. So it's going to be, I think it's going to be a very tough choice. How do you think?
Challenging. It's challenging, but I have to give the USTA kudos for really trying to make it the safest and healthiest and trying to make it happen. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the player's decision, and they're not going to make that decision until 2 to 3 weeks before the tournament.
Yeah.
You know, at your time, the players didn't have many people in the team. You didn't have a physio, doctor, masseur, 10,000 people around you. Nowadays, all the players have bigger team, wider team, broader team. apparently now they may have to hire one more person, which will be a sort of spy, an agent to find out if the other player will come or not come to play that tournament. Because if we find out that someone is not going, they will start thinking, oh, maybe I should go and make and win the title and make one and get one more major. So there will be a James Bond for each player now in the team.
That's a book. That's a book about to be written. Good job. Good idea. Good idea.
Okay, listen, we have kept you a long time, more than you promised to give it to us, and I have to ask you to beg. I beg your pardon. We say in English, because I also had to put you in touch again and again and again with Steve Flink, and that is, you know, it's. I understand it must have been a nightmare for you in the last 40 years, but but what can I do? You know, he was insisting so much that I felt bad, you know, if I wasn't giving him this chance, you know, this option.
I wouldn't have done it without Steve.
I appreciate that.
Listen, thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks to you both. I am really flattered and honored to have you here in Ubi Tennis. Usually I say, here we are with Ubi Tennis. This time I didn't say it, but I will say it now. Here we have been with Chris Evert, a time legend, living legend in the tennis world. And also, okay, there was also Steve Flink.
Thank you.